So, tonight we're going to talk about Daniel chapter 3, verses 1 through 30. Basically, Daniel chapter 3 is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. King Nebuchadnezzar never gave second chances because it was the king's way or the highway. And usually the highway meant... But he gave Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego a second chance. Who could tell me the second chance that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got?
Oh, okay, so they didn't worship the big idol bunny thing. Oh no,
Right.
that was VeggieTales version.
They did not worship the bunny.
He gave him another chance. He's like, I'll give you another chance and I'll play the music again. And then he played again and they just stood there.
Now, how many of you, when you read that story, you think it like happened the next day? Like happened right then and there? Every time I've read the story, I always assumed that it was like, okay, let's try this again. Play it again, fellas. The chance they got didn't happen like immediately. Like he was like, okay, so this is what I'm gonna do for you guys. The next time you hear the music, you better drop. The third chapter of Daniel gives us the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In the first chapters of the book, we find that Daniel's friends merely appear as Daniel's friends. And in the remaining chapters, they don't appear at all, which is really cool. So at the beginning of the book of Daniel, we don't even know they're Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We just know, oh, they're Daniel's three friends that he got to. This is why I like David Jeremiah, because he says that scholars believe that at least 20 years went between the events of the second and third chapter of Daniel. So 20 years from the first time we hear of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being Daniel's friends, 20 years later we find Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego getting ready to tell the king basically, no. In the first two chapters of Daniel, we see the king, right, is tormented by these visions and these dreams, right? So basically Daniel saves all of the king's wise men and soothsayers. So the first two chapters we figure this out. Okay, so the king is really ticked off that nobody can figure out why he's having these crazy visions and dreams, right? So he tells all of his crazy soothsayers and vision dreamers and dream scholars and astrologers and whatever they are, here's your deadline, figure it out or I'm going to axe murder all of you. Not only am I going to axe murder you, but I'm going to axe murder every single person you love. What happens is these guys are going crazy. Well, Daniel gets it. Oh, well, I can do this. It's not a big deal. So the soothsayers go, okay, we have Daniel here who can take care of this. So Daniel goes in and he's like, okay, this is what's going to happen. Daniel was gangster because he didn't even need the king to talk to him. Like the king was like, well, no, Daniel was like, no, you don't tell me your dream. I'm going to tell you your dream. What? Had a microphone, he would drop it. So then the king, all of a sudden his heart has changed. And now he is like, okay, so now we're all going to worship the God of Daniel. So fast forward, like super fast forward, 20 years later, we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the king's mindset is no longer the mindset of someone worshiping God. Now we all know the king in these stories kind of loses his sight for God like 3 times, if I'm not mistaken, like third time. Anyway, so he's like this. He's like, okay, so I've completely forgotten about the God of Daniel, and I have decided that I will become your God. So basically, like me walking in and being like, okay, listen, people, I am now Jesus. I expect you all to bow down and worship me. So 20 years later, King Nebuchadnezzar no longer has an idea that he loves God or that God is blessing him. He thinks that he's doing all this on his own because his wealth is actually multiplied abundantly. So, Daniel chapter 3 verse 1, we find out that Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold. So it was 60 cubits tall and 6 cubits wide. So basically it was 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. If I read history correctly, it was built in the desert and like everybody could see it. Like anytime there was a blue, you could like turn around and like see this bright shiny thingy. And that's how you had to fall down. So the image of gold was ugly and very oddly proportioned. And everyone had to worship it. He was like, wow, this thing is spectacular. And everybody else is going like... It was clearly intended to be a religious act for the word worship to appear 11 times in chapter 3 of Daniel. So Nebuchadnezzar was really trying to start like Nebuchadnezzarism. King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather all the officials of the provinces to come to his dedication of the image of King Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel chapter 3 verse 2 is when he does that. Now here's the thing. When he's talking about you were invited to King Nebuchadnezzar's party, when you got the invite, there was no RSVP. There was no, oh, are you coming? Are you bringing a +1? It was literally, no, you're coming. And if you missed, you better be dead, because you will be dead. Read verses 1, 2, and 3.
King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high, 60 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura on the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. The satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial assembled for the dedication of the image that the king Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. So basically, here's what we're starting out with. King Nebuchadnezzar forgets about God, and he's like, okay, listen, you know what? I have created a kingdom that is awesome. So I must be awesome. And he was awesome. So he thought to himself, since nobody will defy me, I am going to create Nebuchadnezzarism. But first, how am I going to do this? Let's see, create a big bunny.
I'm going to create a giant Easter bunny.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put my face on it. And then I'm going to put it out in the middle of nowhere. And it's going to be so big that when the sun shines on it, everybody's going to see it and they're going to be like, wow, this ugly thing is pretty because I told them to tell me it was pretty. So before he could introduce it, he had to have a dedication. He's like, I need to have a party to dedicate my new golden image and religion. So basically the dedication was one giant party where he called everybody together that was somebody in the kingdom of Babylon. So the first part that we need to understand is that he had a dedication. He was like, okay, I'm awesome. I want everybody to throw me a party, and this is how I'm going to introduce this to the world. So Daniel chapter 3 verses 4 through 7, it kind of reminds me of, you ever see those like old movies where the little boy is standing on the corner and he's got the newspaper going, extra, extra.
Oh yeah!
Right?
So cute.
So basically this is what he has. It says, a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded. Who do we know in our life that commands us, other than our parents, spiritually, commands us to do stuff?
God.
Oh.
You need to pray to me.
So what do you think Nebuchadnezzar was really putting himself as? When he's commanding them
repeat.
to worship.
No, he
Nebuchadnezzar was really a torn man. Because every time he sees a miracle, he's like, oh, Jesus! But then once the miracle is gone for like 20 years, he's like, I am God. And then Jesus has to come back and anyway. Then he puts out the demand. Herald cries out aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the music, you shall fall down and worship this gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So someone has estimated that the head count at this assembly may have been as many as 300,000 people.
Ooh.
So 300,000 people were at this assembly, at this dedication, at this whatever it was, with people coming from all over the vast Babylonian Empire. And King Nebuchadnezzar says, you know what? I'm so good, I'm not even going to announce it. I'm going to have you guys announce it. So I'm going to sit here and revel in my glory. So when the orchestra began to play, all 300,000 people bowed down.
That must have looked so weird.
Whoa!
How creepy. The king is all sorts of on a pedestal, thinking that I am the king of all. And they all just go, whoop, except for 3. Now, do you think maybe someone stood out like a sore thumb?
Maybe.
I think 3 people did.
I think 3 people did. Can you imagine?
Wait, do you think they
Like,
were together then?
There's 300,000 people, and these dudes are like, they're looking at each other like, yo, this dude's nuts. Shadrach's probably leaning up against the wall going, yo, think this king's done lost his mind. Homeboy, snap! Built that ugly thing, what's he think this is? I know he ain't serious. Then he starts playing that music, and I can imagine they're like, oh my goodness. Oh, really? Really? And then everybody drops to the floor, and there's these 3 guys, they're going.
It's like a football stadium, everybody's sitting down.
They're going. They're probably looking at this guy next to him going like this. Ooh, what up? I know you went to church with me last week. What are you doing? This dude's like, Grandpa, what are you doing? Weren't you just like raising your hand to Jesus last week? He's like, yeah, but homeboy's gonna kill me if I don't do this. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego like, well, Jesus is gonna put you in hell, son, for denying him. Like they're probably looking down at him like this. You know you're going right to hell, buddy.
I might die, but I know where I'm going.
Jesus said you should not deny or be ashamed of me and not to worship some crazy fool. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were like stranded men on a bowing island of crazy. So then we have point 3. So we have the dedication, we have his demands, and here's the cool part, we have defiance. Every revolution starts with some form of defiance. Daniel chapter 3 verses 8 through 12. Who was reading?
I was.
Read.
So, at this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, may the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. And that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. And there is more. But there will be some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up.
So,
Word.
the same knuckleheads that the God of Daniel saved 20 years before from the axe murderer is now saying, guess what? You should kill these fools.
Oh.
Burn.
I never thought of that.
So,
That's creepy.
So the same people that could not say, hey, guess what, king? Your dream means this. So you see, when Daniel interpreted the dreams, he prayed with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they knew the 3 were friends with Daniel. So the same people that Daniel saved from the guillotine, now they're like, ha 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 ha, suckers, because now we want you dead. How messed up is that?
So messed up.
Let me save your life. Oh, so 20 years from now you can be like, yeah, I've been waiting for this. That's exactly what happened. They waited 20 years for the moment they could say, Karacha. So, king, you have 3 other Jews that refuse to bow down to what you asked them to bow down to. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were high appointed officials in the kingdom. They were like top dog to the king. And the king had a soft heart for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. First, they accused them of disrespecting the king. Now, I believe the Bible says that we are to follow the laws, right? It says, when they asked if we should pay taxes, he said, well, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Now, we have a very, very interesting situation here. So the Bible says that we are to follow the laws of man. But the laws of man completely disregards the law of God in this instant. Right? So what do? Do we do what God said and follow the law of the land? Or do we do what God said and not worship the idol? You see, whenever he says to follow the law of the land, it doesn't mean to do something that's going to take you away from him. The second accusation they made was, they do not serve your gods.
How dare they?
Wait. They do not serve your gods, but yet they're worshiping an idol made of him.
Ooh.
Made to look like him, if I'm not. So whose gods are they worshiping? Or are they worshiping Nebuchadnezzar? Dun 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 dun. See, King Nebuchadnezzar even got away from his own creepy, crazy gods and started believing that himself was higher than anything. So even in the sense where he was saying he does not serve your gods, King Nebuchadnezzar was putting himself among the gods. It is their final accusation, however, that infuriated the king when they said, they do not worship your image. Here's the confusion. There's two words that show that there's confusion amongst the religious belief that they have. They do not serve your gods. So back in that day, whenever the kings or whatever had gods that weren't God, what did they have made that resembled the God that they worship? Statues. Right? So, he got mad because they refused to worship his image. Do you see the confusion? Are we worshiping his gods or are we worshiping him? That's the confusion that Satan puts in people when they start following false religion. Those people didn't know if they were following Nebuchadnezzar or if they were following some crazy other god image. But the fact is, Nebuchadnezzar was able to sneak in his image. Now, I think we have to learn, how many cults do you see start off with a version of the biblical truth?
Almost all of them.
Almost all of them start off with a portion of biblical truth. But a false religion will breed confusion. It shows the confusion of false worship and false idols. They don't know who they're worshiping. He knows that they're worshiping him. But according to them, they're worshiping his gods. Creepy, crazy, what?